So how do you outsmart a narcissist? And as a narcissist myself, I can tell you it ain't that hard. And most of the world is going about working with narcissists in the complete wrong way. So I work with narcissists every day, working on their healing, and Kira works with loved ones of narcissists. And what I typically see is that someone becomes super educated about all the tools that a narcissist use, and then they come at the narcissist with these tools. You're being delusional. You're gaslighting me. You're emotionally hijacking this situation, and thinking that if they point out the behavior, the narcissist will stop what they're doing and that they'll solve it. And that has the opposite effect. That is like throwing gasoline on the situation, and it just makes things so much worse. So, in this video, we're going to teach you how to outsmart a narcissist, and we want you to use your powers for good. This isn't a how to hurt a narcissist. We hope that these tools actually become a way to bring more peace and understanding through your world. And we're going to outline some 5 specific tools that we have that will make this completely different for you. And I will also share what it's like from my perspective when those tools are used right and when they're not used right. So, did I miss anything?
No, that sounds great. And I just want to take a playful perspective to this, because the truth is that being in a relationship with a narcissist can become quite the game. Mm-hmm. It can become quite the game. It's a game for them sometimes, it feels like, when you're on the receiving end. And I think one thing we've always joked about is that it feels like I had to have some like ninja Jedi skills to be able to like pull myself out of some of those really nasty dynamics. So we're hoping that this can be a playful conversation. We're looking to outsmart a narcissist from the perspective of some benevolent manipulation of the situation. And we're hoping these tools will really help.
There's probably 1,000 times I looked at Kira and was like, how did you get me to do that? And she's like, benevolent manipulation, my dear.
It's true. It's our inside joke. Hopefully you see that playfully how we do. But yeah. I want to start with the first thing we're going to talk about. So the first thing we're going to talk about is learning how to speak their language. Learning how to speak their language. And I'll tell you why this is important. You can actually find the origins of this in the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, right? By
Every Narcissist Bible.
By
At least narcissists
Carnegie.
who went through business school.
Yeah. And you essentially need to learn how to play the narcissist game, but instead of from a harmful perspective, you're taking those principles and you're moving them into the light perspective. Mm-hmm. So the first one is knowing how to speak their language, knowing how to get on their level. Jordan mentioned this earlier when he said people are coming and bringing pop psychology things into their relationship and saying all of these fancy words, and that's when they think they're outsmarting their narcissist by essentially trying to have all the knowledge or information on what they're doing. You're now illuminated and they're not, and you're almost putting them in a lower position when you do that. I think that the more brilliant thing to do is to almost hide yourself and not try to be smarter than them, but try to understand them, understand the language that they use, what they believe in, how they tick, what makes sense to them. So I'll use kind of a funny example. Jordan he used to get in these kind of mental models about the way the world works. And I had to use the language that he was excited about to talk to him about things that I wanted to talk about, but embedding them inside of his language. So he would talk a lot about being empowered, and I think you had a little bit of spiritual narcissism because because it was a lot around like being kind of an enlightened person, you know. And so he would use language around like, well, you know, self-love, self-care, you know, all these things, but they were kind of used in a narcissistic way where he'd say, you know, I'm not going to caretake you. And I remember thinking like, that's really interesting because he's using language that sounds like it fits in pop psychology, but it's actually he's using it to justify not taking care of me.
Selfishness.
Not take care of me in the relationship. And so I had to use that same language, but very gently, lovingly self-reflect with him about what he was saying and what those words meant to him, right? So I'm like, okay, so when you say caretake, what does that mean to you? And when you say enlightenment, what does that mean to you? I want to understand your language. Because you could use the same word and it has a totally different meaning to you than it does to that person. Mm-hmm. So part of understanding someone and knowing how to work with them is knowing what language means, what those words and definitions are, so that you can properly use the definitions that you want in order to send the correct message to that person. Because when you're trying to speak above them or using terms that they don't understand, not only will they not listen to you, but they don't understand what you're trying to say, or they misunderstand what you're saying to mean something else. And so that's our number one tactic to begin outsmarting a situation, is to know your audience, know who you're talking to, and make sure that all of the words that you're using are going to appeal to them in a way that will facilitate change in the direction you want, rather than confuse them, shut them down, or make them defensive.
Yeah. I mean, I see this in my clients as well, and I've seen it myself, is that we narcissists have really strong mental models. We're like, yes, this works this way, and this is just how things are. And that's a part of how we delude ourselves and how we stay in a delusional place, is like, well, I've changed the meaning of this word to mean this so that I can feel good about being selfish or doing that thing, right? And so it's like you're kind of pushing against the pricks if you're trying to get them to understand like your language. And also what you risk is that the narcissist feels stupid. So you're using a term I've never heard, you're using something, and it's like, one, I'm probably not bought into it the same that I bought into my own terminology. And two, I'm not, you're making me feel dumb. And so I'm like, you're going to start to put up my defenses. And so it's just really smart to use their own language that they already love and resonate, and just work within their own language, so.
I think that goes really nicely into the second tool, which is learn how to get inside of the delusion of your narcissist. Mm-hmm. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Totally. Like, I remember Kira and I actually had this friend who at a certain point I was like convinced. I was like, I'm pretty sure he's a narcissist. And she was like, yeah, I know. She's like, you just got to get inside the delusion with him. And I was so blown away by the way you kind of said that. But you're just like, yeah, I mean, you've been surrounded by it your whole life. And so it's very easy for you to realize, well, if I push up against it, then it's just going to, bite at me. It's just going to, cause all their defenses to pop up. And I think that when someone you call a narcissist delusional, it's just infuriating. It just makes them feel stupid and shameful. It's like our psyche is already running from shame and feeling like something's wrong with us or that we're broken. So calling me delusional is a surefire way for me to just say, you're an asshole. Who would say that? That's not kind. Like, I would just immediately kick out anything you're trying to tell me at that point. Okay.
Well, and I think beyond that, we're not doing this from a condescending perspective.
Yeah.
I'm using the word delusion because I think that, it's the popular word that we're using when we're talking about narcissists, and it's something people can understand. But the truth is that every single person is having their own experience, right? You could be seeing 6 and I could be seeing 9, and both are true. And I think that validating that someone else's experience of life is just as true as yours is a compassionate way to deal with people.
Yeah.
So this is meant to be through a compassionate lens. So when I say we're getting into the delusion with them, we're essentially saying, I'm going to suspend any disbelief, and I'm going to, in essence, go ahead and say, well, if everything they're thinking, feeling, believing is true, how would I treat this person? Yeah. Even if you know in the back of your head that it's not, or it's not the healthiest perspective, or it's not the truest perspective, it's more important that you help that person feel seen, understood, and safe. Because a person that feels unsafe, or like you're condescending to them, or they feel accused, is never going to heal or change or improve from that point of view.
Yeah.
If they feel like you're looking down on them, or you think they're stupid, or you're trying to convince them that who they are, what they believe is wrong, you'll never be successful. So I think it's more important that you help them feel safe by being on their team and saying, yeah, let's get in that delusion. Let's say that you are Jesus Christ. Let's just go ahead. Like, let's play a game. Let's say you are Jesus Christ. Like you seem to think you are, I'm just being silly at this point, but being extreme to get a point across. But say, if you are Jesus Christ, tell me more. Tell me more. Like, if that's true, let's talk about life through your lens as if that is the truth, and help them feel like you can see things from their perspective, because what it does is it creates feelings of trust and safety in that person. And they're a lot more likely to hear your perspective when you do get to the point of sharing it. So right now we're just laying a foundation, because you don't want to come at somebody using the wrong language, telling them that their perspective is completely wrong, and from that point try to change their heart. That never worked for anybody.
Yeah.
I was a missionary for my church for years, and that's something that I learned. You don't knock on a Catholic's door that's been Catholic for like 500 years in their family line and be like, did you know you're wrong about your beliefs? Like, that doesn't work in any situation.
Yeah.
The only thing that works is, and I'm not saying Catholics are delusional. I'm just saying that, like, I had to let go of my beliefs and make their beliefs the priority and say, tell me what you already believe about the world. And then let me find the resonant truths that we both agree on, and let's talk about that. And I think that's why it's important that you understand your narcissist's view of the world from a compassionate, non-judgmental perspective, because when you're viewing them through that lens, you can see where there is an overlap, and that's your sweet spot. Because where your language and your life and the way you view life or your belief systems overlap is the exact places where you're going to be able to have a meaningful conversation with love, compassion, non-defensiveness. And it's always the goal to seek unity and oneness, and like, where are we the same? Where do we Venn diagram? Where we can truly understand each other, instead of approaching someone from the perspective of, well, how are we different? How am I right? How can I prove you wrong? Mm-hmm. So, and I honestly, this works for a conversation with anybody, right? Yeah. In sales and talking to your family about some drama, like knowing how to speak their language, knowing their delusion in this situation, or even just their beliefs about the world, and being able to put yours to the side so that you can be fully in that conversation with them from their perspective. That's the perfect way to set up the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you nailed it. Let's move on to number 3.
Great. Number 3, don't shame them. The reason why we don't want to shame them is because a narcissist psyche is essentially a shame landmine.
Yeah.
So it's very easy to shame them. Even just the energy that you feel of shaming them inside, they can sense it.
Yeah.
So even if you're not saying inherently shaming words, if your energy is like shame on you, that's going to instantly trigger the situation into a conflict and disconnect you. Why don't you share more about why you think that's true?
Yeah, I mean, so the narcissist mind, my brain is wired to avoid my deep feelings of shame. As a child, it was so overwhelming to feel that I was unlovable, that I shouldn't be here, that I would want to off myself. I would not want to exist on the planet, which is a threat to my life, right? So my psyche, of course, borrowed narcissism and said, cool, we're actually the best thing in the world. So we're as far away from that risk of death as possible. And to a child as well, it definitely is death, because to think that you're unlovable, you truly are at risk of death if your parents don't love you, right? Like, you will not survive on the savannah. It's like wired into our brain from the 100 billion humans who came before us to know that if my parents and my tribe don't love me, I'm at a higher risk of death. And so the brain is trying to push me as far away as possible from that concept that I'm unlovable and say, no, I'm the best thing in the world. And that's what my narcissism is. But I can only be the best thing in the world if I lie to myself about who I am and I wear masks and I keep up the delusion. And so imagine I have this whole defense system. And the moment that you attack it and say, you're emotionally hijacking, you're delusional, you're the worst. Anytime you come at me with everything I'm doing wrong in the situation, it's like my defenses pop up and I literally can't see what you're saying. I will immediately, like, my mind goes so quickly to see what you did wrong. And then I go, well, I'm only doing this because of you. And it's like the sort of mental gymnastics my mind can do to never take your criticism when it's in a shaming way is mind blowing. Honestly,
it's a fortress. It'll never let any information in at all, even if it's 100% true.
Yeah. And so the way that you really approached things with me that was so different than anyone I'd ever been with before that was that it's not like you tiptoe around the subject and you just wouldn't ever say that I did something wrong. It's like you would wait until things calmed down a little bit and you'd be like, hey, babe, I really felt hurt when you did that. And what I really need in a partner is that someone who can do this for me. Do you think that's possible? And that was very different because it's like, oh, in that situation, I get to be her savior. I get to be the good guy. I get to help her. And yes, I hurt her. She pointed out that I hurt her and I can get over that as long as she's showing me how to be the one who helps her. Right?
Yeah, I think that, I love that. And I think that's true some percentage of the time. But I would say that a lot of the time I would say you hurt me and you would get really mad because it would trigger shame.
Sure. Yeah.
So I think that what's essential in that conversation is to not shame someone essentially means to say who you are is lovable and acceptable. And at the same time, this isn't working, you know? And so what I mean by that is I would often point out that your reaction was, I was compassionate to the fact that I had caused you to feel shame.
Yeah.
Right? And so like the opposite of shaming someone is liberating them from shame by telling them that they don't need to be ashamed for who they are. So like an example of that would be if I said, this behavior, you forgetting this important date, that hurt me. You saying, well, this, and I would say, oh, do you feel like I'm saying you're a bad guy?
Yeah, use that a lot.
Do you feel like I'm saying you're a bad guy? You're like, yeah, you are saying that. You're saying it's my fault. And I say, let me say that again. I don't think this is your fault. I don't think that you're a horrible person. I don't think you're a bad guy. I am just saying that what I need and what happened are different.
Yeah.
And I think that can be really hard to do because when you've been hurt by someone, you want to make them the bad guy.
Yeah.
You do. Like when your partner forgets something that matters to you, it's so easy to be like, I'm a victim to he's thoughtless and uncaring and selfish. It's like you're shaming that person. You're saying your weaknesses are something to be ashamed about. And the truth is, like, let's just be more humble as humans and admit that all of us have weaknesses.
Yeah.
Nobody's perfect. And sure, you might be better at something than your narcissistic partner, but why do you need to point that out to them other than to hurt them?
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, what if you taught them how to be loving by extending that compassion to them and saying, not saying it's okay that you did that, so let's let it go. That's abandoning yourself. But saying, what you did hurt me and isn't okay, but who you are is okay.
Yeah.
And that's the difference, is that someone that internalizes their shame, it goes from what I did isn't okay to who I am isn't okay.
Yeah.
And if you send the message to your partner in a conversation that who you are isn't okay, or you notice that that's what they're receiving from what you said, it's so important to notice and neutralize the shame in the situation immediately before you continue to talk.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to get anywhere in a conversation if shame is triggered or if they're feeling ashamed or shamed by you.
Yeah.
So that's the next tool I would say, is that don't shame them. And if shame gets triggered inside of them, stop the whole conversation and give compassion to that and say, hey, it's all love here. Like, you don't have to be perfect. Who you are is lovable and acceptable to me. And you made a mistake, and that's okay. Everybody makes mistakes. I do it all the time.
Yeah, I just need to double tap on that. You're absolutely right. And that was something that just hit me so hard. I remember the moments when I really let it in. A lot of times I didn't let it in, and I was like, no, you actually don't think that. You're just saying that because you're trying to manipulate me or whatever. But the times that I did let that in, it hit. And I would say that that's part of the reason I'm such a little puppy for you now. Like, I will just like literally do anything for you, is because I felt you were the first person that loved every part of me, and even though, moving through the narcissism was hard and it was painful and it was scary for me to do, I wanted to do it so badly because I felt that unconditional love from you of who I am as a person.
Yeah.
So,
I love that.
Yeah.
That's a good one. And honestly, something I'm thinking about right now as we're talking is like, that's not an interaction you can fake.
Yeah.
So like, as a loved one, if you're like, I do feel like they should be ashamed for who they are, all that tells me is that you deep down have a belief that you probably don't accept yourself on some level. Because everything that we experience in our lens is reflecting our own beliefs about the world. So if you as a person believe that shame is a healthy emotion or it's something that someone should feel, then I would just investigate that belief. I would say, does this belief of shame actually make me a better person? Does it make the world a better place? Who's ever become a better person because of shame? And I just want you to reflect on that, because the truth is that shame doesn't do anything but cause harm. When you feel shame, when you internalize shame, when you project shame onto somebody else, it does nothing but cause harm. And I think that's the script we're trying to flip on the internet, is saying, let's shame narcissists into isolation and get them away from us. And I just think that that's untrue. I think that shaming things and people and situations and trying to get them to go away does nothing but improve or expand the negativity and the hurt that's embedded in the situation. So in order to change the world, we have to change how we think about the world. We have to change how we think about the situation. In my hypnotherapy training, I learned all about how our beliefs create our world. And so if it's just a simple shift into saying, you know what, I'm going to believe that at our core, no matter how many mistakes or failures somebody has had, they still are deserving of love and compassion. I think that can change the way that you're interacting with somebody. And I think that that's, why certain systems of thought like Christianity has thrived throughout time, and why, people are like, this works. And, I'm not a Christian, but I can see that it works. It's like, what I can see is that the message of Jesus Christ that essentially says there is no sin that you do that you can't essentially repent for. If we change it into my language, I would say there's nothing about you that is unlovable at its core, or unworthy of my love and compassion. If you take on that perspective, that is the most healing perspective that you can have in a situation. And I think it's the most true perspective, because to assume that human beings should be flawless, that they should know better and should never make a mistake, just isn't realistic. Yeah. I think it's more realistic to say, yeah, you have a lot of problems inside of you, and every single one of those problems deserves love, compassion, and understanding. And when you look at somebody with that perspective heals.
Yeah.
Because it might be the first time that person has ever felt acceptance from another human being.
Yeah.
And I remember reading this book called Real Love by Greg Bear. I think it's an amazing book, but essentially what I took away from that book is that real love is full acceptance of another person. If there's anything about that person you don't accept, even the concept like hate the sin, but hate the sin, but love the sinner. It's like, you're trying to be cute and find a way to still judge a part of that person, you know? I don't know. It's like maybe the real meaning behind that is deeper, but I think how it gets used in culturally is to say, well, I can love part of you, but not another part of you. You know, I can hate this part and love this part. And I just think that the truth is the real love is true acceptance of every part of that person and saying, you know, even the very worst, grossest, darkest, most hurtful part of you deserves love and compassion. And I think that that's really the way to interact with someone in a way that doesn't create feelings of shame. It's the only way, because we're all mirrors for each other. And if they're looking at you and you're mirroring back, I think you should be ashamed of that part of you. Then you're only adding to the shame that that person has.
Yeah.
But when they look in your eyes and you mirror back, you know, that window of the soul, when your soul's reflecting back, who you are is okay. I accept you 100%. You know, that doesn't mean that I'm going to let you treat me bad.
Yeah.
I'll still, you know, have boundaries and there will be consequences, but I love and accept you no matter what, because you deserve love, because everybody deserves love. I think that is the only perspective that reduces feelings of shame in another person.
Yeah.
And it's an essential perspective to have if you want healing to occur in any relationship.
Yeah. I love that. This actually, I wonder if we throw in another one that would make it to the list. And I think this is helpful in any argument with anyone, narcissist or not, but I think having deep empathy for somebody. Like if before you confronted or had this conversation with someone, if you closed your eyes and like visualized opening your heart to this person and put yourself in their shoes for a minute, what it felt like for them to feel completely alone or abandoned or abused or neglected, and to imagine how hard it would be that to feel deep feelings of unlovability and to be running from that and to be completely even unaware that they're running from that most of the time. I think understanding that you're working with someone who has high amounts of shame and just feeling that in your heart for them. Think of the moment you felt the most shame you've ever felt. And then going to the conversation with that sort of empathy and open-heartedness, I think that would be a game changer, you know?
Yeah, something that Ram Dass says that really resonates with me is he talks about compassion being the ability to hold pain and love at the same time. And I think that a lot of people in narcissistic relationships have a lot of pain.
Yeah.
And I'll speak for
Both
myself and say that like the pain that our relationship caused me was excruciating. It touched on my deepest wounds. And to say, I'm going to open my heart even though I feel this pain, and I'm going to have compassion, meaning I'm going to have love for you because I believe every person is deserving of love, and at the same time, not push away my pain or ignore my pain or not acknowledge it, but say like the pain inside of me is real.
Yeah.
And the love inside of me is real. And humans can hold that extreme of a duality at the same time.
Yeah.
And I think that sets the ground for empathy to be possible. Because what you're saying is, like you said, can I open my heart and be willing to see that the pain that I feel and the pain they feel, like we are one. Every human being experiences deep pain.
Yeah.
Even if it's not trauma, neglect, and abandonment. I mean, we've had narcissists come to us who they say nothing bad's ever happened to me. Yeah. I had a perfect life. I was a spoiled brat.
Yeah.
You know, but the pain that they have is that they're not resilient.
Yeah.
They don't know how to handle life when it's not cushioned for them, which in its own way is a form of pain and neglect, because now you're out there by yourself doing life and you have no tools.
Yeah, you're supposed to adult and you've been on training wheels your whole life. So your parents have always taken the pain from you.
Yeah, so there's always a compassionate perspective that you can have for the person in front of you. And that's an essential piece to the puzzle. So I just want to catch us up to speed. Learning to speak their language. Learning how to get into their worldview or delusion. Don't shame them, and have a compassionate approach to the conversation. And I'm going to move on to the next piece, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
The next thing would be don't try to be right. If you want to have any conversation go anywhere, please don't try to be right, because a narcissist is always going to try to be right, and they will go to their grave trying to be right.
Yeah.
So it just changes the whole conversation. If both of you are trying to be right, you're really not going to get anywhere.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean you have to say, I'm wrong, you're right. That's just, we're not saying to like bend over, but what we are saying is that when you make it about being right, the narcissistic defenses pop up, and what they feel like is being said is that I'm wrong. And even when Kira's not saying that I'm wrong, I'll rephrase the conversation back to him, like, well, all I hear is that you're saying I'm wrong and that you're right. And you're like, I'm not even saying that, but just know that's an automation in narcissists to deflect, and because it, again, causes us to feel shame. And when they're feeling shame, we're not going to be able to hear anything you're trying to tell us.
I think the important thing to acknowledge is that anytime you're talking to your narcissistic partner, 9 times out of 10, probably 10 out of 10, their goal is to be right. Right?
Yeah.
Their unconscious goal in the conversation is to be right.
Yeah.
And so you need to help change the goal of the conversation, right? So something I say to you all the time is, this conversation is not about who's right. It's actually about being understood. Let's try to understand each other. Let's make the goal, I'm going to understand you and you're going to understand me. So if you're looking at me through the lens of trying to be right, you're never going to understand me.
Yeah.
Because you have these sunglasses filter on that's just saying wrong, right, wrong, and you just don't get anywhere.
Yeah. I mean, and just to like paint the picture, like I've had clients whose parents were just so emotionally abusive to them. They would call out, nitpick every single little thing they had. Usually their parents are narcissists too, but they'd nitpick every single little thing. They felt deeply criticized. And they already have this fear of being unlovable. And so they have this automation of like not wanting to be wrong. I've actually seen this with a lot of clients too, is that they will try to finish your sentence, the loved one's sentence, to try and act like they know, but what that ends up doing is it makes them feel unheard and makes them feel cut off. But I only point that out to say narcissists don't just like want to be right. They need to be right, because if they are wrong, it feels like what's being said is that everything about them is wrong. And you can bypass that by just saying, like how Kira said, this isn't about who's right or wrong. And that was for me always so freeing to be like, oh, like I'm on this automation of always thinking it's about who's right or wrong. And then I'm always trying to defend myself and always trying to keep myself from being a bad boy again, And when you take the stress off of it and say, this is just about me being seen, this is just about being understood and my feelings, they might still even resist it a little bit. But once they get through that, it is so much it's so relieving for me to go like, oh, well, I can open my heart to you. I can be there for you right now,
Yeah, I think one of my favorite things I've learned to say is, I don't need to be right now. I just need to be heard.
Yeah.
I just need to be understood. And I think that if you want to outsmart a narcissist, then you're going to get them off of their game of always trying to overpower you by being right, because they can't win at a game of just being understood.
Just having a feeling.
Yeah, exactly. And especially when you model teaching them how to be that for them, like there's a lot of times you would talk in a way that, felt very critical and like you were making yourself right and making me wrong. And I would kind of try to understand you instead of respond to that. Like, I'm going to ignore the part where you're trying to be right, and I'm just going to talk about how I can understand you. And I notice you soften a lot when I would just say, honestly, I don't care if you're right. That's fine if you want to be right, but really I want to understand you. So can we get out of like the who's right conversation and instead get into like, help me understand you. Help me understand what you're feeling.
Yeah.
Once again, it's essentially all of these steps are saying, let's look at what the narcissist is trying to do automatically, which is to dominate or control or manipulate. And you're just changing the game so that it no longer applies.
Yeah.
It's no longer available.
Yeah.
The game can no longer happen. If you play the game with them, it'll last forever. Right? So I think that's a super essential tool. Don't even have the conversation of who's right or not, and then you can't get stuck in that trap.
Yeah.
All right, we have the last thing we want to say
Which is one of the most powerful ones. Keep going.
Yes, the most powerful tool is to conserve your energy and take your power back in the situation. Stop giving your energy to the game. Stop giving your energy to the dynamic that's draining you and causing you harm. And there's a few ways you can do that, but there's one main essential way, which, you could sum it up and say it's really good boundaries. But my favorite way to do it is when it comes to having a conversation and how to outsmart them in the situation, is to be unwilling to have a conversation that is feeding any of their narcissistic behaviors. So something that we've done in our relationship is that I would refuse to have a conversation with him if he was dysregulated, talking to me super angry and criticizing, ego inflated, defensive. Anytime I could sense that the narcissist part was driving the bus and essentially taking over the conversation, I wouldn't have the conversation. So that just ends the game there. It can't continue if you're unwilling to engage and give it your energy. So it might look a little like something like this. I say, hey, babe, it really hurt my feelings that it really hurt my feelings that you forgot to put this away when I asked you to. And if he says, no, I didn't. I didn't do that.
Well, what I was doing was trying to do this because of this. And I'm thinking if I explain it to her that she'll not be sad.
Yeah, it's like the automatic defensive response. I'll just say, oh, I can tell that, my comments are making you feel like you need to defend yourself. That's fine. It's just that I can't have this conversation with you unless you're willing to listen and empathize with my feelings.
Yeah.
And that's fine if that's not available. It's just, you let me know when you're ready, and I'm just not going to have the conversation until you're ready.
Yeah, that was a key one. And we had set that rule beforehand. We read the book, Nonviolent Communication. And it's such a simple rule book of saying, don't be the person who has the problem, don't be critical. And the person who's hearing the problem, don't be defensive, and needs to be empathetic. Right. So we just said, cool, that's our rule book. And we had decided ahead of time, you said, well, I just don't want to engage. When you get defensive, it just exhausts me and I feel unseen and it hurts me and I don't want to do it. So we're not going to do it. And there were so many times that you just very gently, like you said, and even sometimes you just say, it looks like you're being a little defensive. Let me know when you're ready to have this conversation. And I knew what that meant. I knew that meant that conversation we'd had before. And I'd be like, "Argh!" Sometimes I get mad, and sometimes I'd be like, damn, she's right. Okay. And like in 2 seconds, I'd be like, you're right. Okay. Boop. And we'd have it. Most of the times, especially at first, it was like,
yeah, sometimes you need like a 30-minute walk. Yeah,
I'd have to go shake it out. I'm like, what do you mean I'm being defensive? But again, we're trying to say these things non-shaming. We're going back to that old conversation. I need it because I need, because it hurts my feelings when we go down that rabbit hole. So, this is why I'm doing it. That's a non-shaming approach and works. It forces me to go, I am defensive. Oh man. And I have to stop and open my heart and see you. And then we can have a real conversation.
I think in even better language, we're lucky that worked for you. I think for a lot of people, they might not appreciate being called defensive. So, I would say that an even better language would be to say, in order for me to feel safe having this conversation, I need a fully present listening ear. I can't have you in the talk. You're not in the talking seat yet, unless you're ready to hear me out fully without responding. I can't have this conversation, because you're not labeling their behavior anymore. You're just saying what you need, which is really the best way to communicate if we can.
Sure.
But the main point that we want to get across is that you've made the commitment to yourself that you're not going to have a conversation that drags you through the mud in a defensive, mental and emotional spar.
That drains your energy.
Yeah. If you just say, I actually will not have a conversation. And I've had some loved ones I've talked to that are like, well, then what if they never have the conversation? And that is a reality. And I've had partners who are more on the avoidant scale, and they will actually say, okay, cool. I'm glad not to have this conversation. See you later. And we've even had a few of those moments where he's like, cool, I got out of it. And then he would say, hey, I want to tell you about work today. And I say, oh, honey, I'm sorry, but my feelings are still hurt and I can't talk until we have that conversation.
Yeah.
And what ends up happening is at some point your narcissistic partner is like, well, I want to talk about football and I want to talk about work and I want to talk about the car I want to buy. So I guess that it's essential for me to address her feelings at some point.
Yeah.
Where you set that boundary where you're essentially saying, I'm not going to give my energy to a draining, hurtful conversation, and I'm also not going to have any other conversation until my needs and feelings are prioritized.
Yeah, because that self-abandonment is just as draining, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I completely agree. And we just have to remember that you have to remember that it's about energy more than anything. Know what's draining to you and don't blow your wad every day doing something else. Go, cool. I'm going to put up this boundary. I'm going to preserve myself. I'm going to go do this, hang out with my friends, do something nourishing for me. And when you're ready to re-engage, I'll have a full battery when we do it. I'm not going to drain myself in something that's going nowhere and then be pissed at you later. So, this is such a key piece. And people, whenever they use the word boundaries, every time I hear it, I feel like it's always used wrong. People say, I'm going to place a boundary on you. You're not allowed to do that. That's not what it is. The point of a boundary is to preserve your energy. It's a wall that I put up to keep me from getting sucked into things. And I had a client who had really big anger problems. He would just blow up and swear and curse, and he wouldn't ever hurt his partner, but he would say mean things and be really loud, and it was hard for them. And I worked with her. We both worked with her. I mean, we were all in the room, and we said, wife, you need to, like, if that's draining you, what can you do to, stop that? She said, well, I'll leave the conversation. I'll make him get out of the car. For some reason, a lot of them happen in the car. And she started leaving him at places. She started being like, all right, like pulling over and be like, we agreed, like, you're breaking the rules. And he would either calm down or get out of the car and kick the dirt for a minute and then come back in calm, and her battery was filled every day because of this, because they just agreed on it. And it's like, if you agree on these things in a calm place, and then later when it's in the moment, it's not hard to just say, sorry. And the other thing about a lot of these boundaries, it's like, set them like way before the narcissist is blowing up. If your boundary is, I'm not going to talk to you if you're blowing up, that's kind of hard because they're pretty dysregulated at that point, versus your boundary was you're being a little bit defensive. It's, the most minute amount of defense. And it was like, we're not having this. And I'm not as likely to blow off the rails at that point because I'm just not there yet. I'm not at that point. So it's smarter to have boundaries that are just like way earlier in the process before things are blowing up, because it's like the narcissist will be like, okay, cool. I can put up with that, or I can follow that thing we agreed to. So,
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think with these steps, it's a combination of being compassionate and meeting someone where they're at, and at the very same time, creating safeguards for yourself that keep you protected. And in any relationship, it's an acknowledgement of you and yourself in the situation. And we really believe that these can help you outsmart any narcissistic person if used benevolently and with the best intentions. So I'll go over them once again, just so we don't forget. Repetition is your best friend. First, learn how to speak their language. Second, try to get into their belief system, understanding the way they view the world, and work with them from that angle. Third, look at them through a compassionate lens instead of a shaming one. Fourth, don't try to be right, but instead seek to be understood and to understand the other person. And last but not least, know your boundaries, protect your energy, and don't engage in a conversation that is anything but supportive to you and what you need in a conversation. And what's really funny as I listen to all of these little tips is really, this is the most important tools for how I talk to my 6-year-old as well.
It's true.
And I don't mean that to be demeaning. All I'm saying is that if you really strip down the cause and the origins of narcissism every child is narcissistic. But what's happened is that they had the helpful and supportive environment that allowed them to grow out of an egocentric point of view into a healthy, functioning adult. The only difference between, a narcissist and a healthy, functioning adult is that they never had that developmental shift. And so sometimes it's helpful, not in a condescending way, but in a compassionate way, to say, I would never try to talk to my 6-year-old from what, I never try to tell him what I learned in therapy. I never try to convince him that I'm right and he's wrong. I never try to shame him into getting the things that I want. And I definitely need really strong boundaries because, that guy he's got big emotions. I'll get sucked right in. And so I think that for any parents that are here, I think that why this is a helpful conversation is because we're not only trying to heal narcissism in adults, but we're also trying to heal any future narcissist from being created.
Yeah.
And I think that when you learn how to treat human beings, whether they're your child or your narcissistic partner or your coworker or your best friend, these are great tools to help you engage with people where you don't allow it to be toxic, where you don't treat them in a harmful way, and you don't allow anyone else to treat you in a harmful way. So we're hoping that these tools are helpful, and we should link those books we talked about in the comments because they were huge in shaping my worldview and helping me understand how to treat people with love and compassion. So let's make sure we do that.
Yeah,
I don't have anything else to add. I think that with these tools, you can get through any conversation with little battle wounds. What would you say?
Yeah, it's hard either way. And we wish you luck out there. It's like, you don't have to stick around with the narcissist. This isn't your job to do. This message is for people who say, if I left this, I might still find myself with another narcissist because I'm drawn to them. Or, I've got kids with this person. I've got a mortgage with this person. Like, I truly love this person. I have a soul connection to this person, which I see very often with people. But this narcissism is something that's like getting in the way. And we don't expect anyone to do these things for the rest of their life. Like, the goal is that you help your narcissist get to the point where they're waking up to their issues and they can do the healing work, because it's absolutely possible. We see it every single day. I've seen quite a few narcissists, in the work that I've done and even outside of that. But if you go look at the people that I've worked with, their partners are leaving reviews and saying, wow, I'm with a completely different person. The person you fell in love with is still there. You can still get to that. And just almost like you remove the narcissism, you peel that part off, and what's left is someone who can be deeply empathetic, who can be caring. And so we hope that is your objective. We don't expect anyone to be, dancing around the narcissist the rest of their life. But if you have the desire to make it happen, to make it work, then hopefully these tools can work for you. So I think that's all we got for you. Thanks, everyone.